How do I look? Okay.
Yeah. Perfect. You're perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Alexis Haw. I'm a junior at Sage Hill High School. I'm currently a participant in Dr. Wong's lab. I'm helping build a platform for the Bridge Ventilator Consortium. And today I'm here with Tom Soto. Hello, everyone. And could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Soto. I am a managing partner and founder of Diverse Communities Impact Fund and a longtime investor in the impact sector here in Southern California. It's my fourth fund and have been a longtime voice as well for diversity in fund management and diversity in technology.
And then why did you join the Bridge Ventilator Consortium and kind of how did you find out about it and what was your role?
Well, it's kind of circuitous, but here it is. The pandemic emerged.
Mhm.
There was a call for more hospital beds, PPE, oxygen, and ventilators in California by our governor, Governor Gavin Newsom. He issued his executive orders on March 13th of 2020, which was a Friday. And that evening, I was talking to Dan Hart, who was CEO of Virgin Orbit, a company where I am senior advisor to. And Dan and I agreed that there is the possibility that we, as a rocket manufacturer, likely had the capacity to build ventilators for emergency use, what we called bridge ventilators. And so Saturday morning, frankly, I texted the governor and he immediately responded. And that email basically said, we believe that we at Virgin Orbit might be able to manufacture emergency bridge ventilators.
Wow.
And he quickly responded and replied all to me and Dan and added several people from his Office of Emergency Services and the Emergency Medical Regulating Authority.
Mhm.
And that person is Dave, gosh, what was his last name? In any case, he put us in touch with all the appropriate people just to start a conversation.
Mhm.
Um, and the governor and I have had a long time relationship from the time that before he was mayor of San Francisco and then lieutenant governor and so forth. So um, I trusted that he really did need ventilators and he trusted that we had capacity. And so that email resulted in our team being invited to participate in this very new body of anesthesiologists and doctors and professions within this sector that was the BBC.
Mhm.
And that Sunday, there was probably 30 to 50 people on a call where we began to initiate this discussion on what it was that Virgin Orbit could do to contribute toward the building of an emergency bridge ventilator that could be used by the people of California.
Mhm.
And so that was the evolution of my involvement. So, uh, you know, um, Dan Hart, my buddy Kevin, we all became part of the BBC, and there were key players within that body, Brian among one of many of them, that helped to drive the direction of the discussion. This is not an area that none of us are familiar with. We're not doctors. We're not anesthesiologists. I don't even like going to the doctor, but here we were building a bridge ventilator from ground up to a reveal,
Right.
and that was our initial involvement.
So how did you get in contact with Virgin Orbit?
Well, I've been a senior advisor to them probably for by that for about a year prior to that.
Oh, I see.
And so I've always helped them think about how to view business development in their markets, government, the regulatory framework. And Dan Hart and I originally knew each other because uh, we are both longtime board members of the California Science Center, which you probably know is home to the shuttle Endeavour. So
Uh,
we have a considerable number of aerospace executives and relationships with folks like Northrop Grumman, SpaceX,
mhm.
Virgin Orbit. And
Wow.
so that's how Dan and I knew each other. And a long time ago, he was asking me some questions about, California and the market and so forth. So I invited him to join me and, the Speaker of the Legislature, a number of senators and so forth. And, and they would come down and take tours of the facility, and they got to know Virgin Orbit pretty well, and also see Virgin Orbit as a resource,
Mhm.
for local education, for school kids, for tours, for STEM programs. And so by the time the pandemic broke and the governor issued his executive order, the governor and his team knew Virgin Orbit pretty well already, because I had brought them into the governor's office to basically say, listen, commercial space is a huge economic development opportunity that not only are we not missing, we need to put more into this space in
Mhm.
order to create more living wage, high skilled jobs in commercial space. And so prior to the pandemic, Virgin Orbit was well regarded in the state legislature and the governor's office. And so when that email went to the governor and he replied all, we both sides had confidence that something can happen.
Mhm. And then it sounds like it was a pretty quick turnover, like right when you emailed him, and then he got right back to you, and then you guys just got right to it, right? Was it
Yeah,
pretty?
I mean, we emailed each other, I think, on Saturday the 14th, and by Sunday, we had this huge conference call, and the ball was rolling,
Yeah.
and it was largely a state of uncertainty, because no one had really gone through a pandemic before. We didn't know what a lockdown was.
Mhm.
Was Virgin Orbit essential services? I mean, who knew, right?
Right.
And we just had to get these designations in place and be lawful and thoughtful about it, so that we wouldn't be seen as or were in violation of anything. So all of that said, we just had to be careful on how we executed the next week or two of activity to ensure that, one, we were in compliance, but two, we didn't lose focus on the immediate objective, which was this pandemic surge was going like this at the time, if you remember.
Mhm.
And so the lockdown was to remember to manage the curve. And then if the curve didn't go down, be prepared to have thousands of ventilators and hospital beds for uh, an epidemic that we had never seen. And praise God, the governor was successful and the people of California were successful in dampening that curve and bringing it down to the level where it's at now. We still have a long way to go, but praise God, we didn't need to use all of that equipment.
Mhm.
But you plan for the worst and hope for the best, and
Right.
that's what the governor did, and I think he did an outstanding job doing so.
So we still had the preventative measures, even if like we were prepared to see like if the numbers did not drop, then we were prepared to provide all of the equipment needed.
That's correct.
I also just like noticed that when you said March 13th, I just realized we hit the 6 month mark of quarantine.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Remember the comments in mid-March were, well, we'll be able to reopen in April 1st, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of the restaurants that were closed is like, well, as long as we open up on April 1st, we're fine.
Mhm.
Then April 1st, then May 1st, then June 1st, all, and here we are.
Yeah.
You know, 50 million people unemployed in the country. And, it's basically hotel workers, restaurant workers,
Mhm.
uh, large entertainment complexes. I mean, watching the Rams last night, how sad was that? $5 billion SoFi Stadium and not one fan
Mhm.
in the seats.
Yeah.
You know, and now this too shall pass. It always will. We'll get through it. But it's a statement on, ultimately, it's going to be a case study on what not to do with a pandemic. And it's everything that our federal government failed to do
Mhm.
in terms of responding to what apparently we now know was very early warnings of this being a pandemic that was going to threaten this presidency like nothing ever has, and them not making as much a priority. In fact, they downplayed it, and it's cost trillions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives,
Mhm.
and will take years for our economy to rebound to its previous state.
Yeah, that's horrible. It's just like it's insane how much this pandemic has affected all of us and people all
Yeah.
around the country and the world too.
Well, while we sit here zooming, my 11-year-old is in the room next door in the sixth grade on Zoom himself with his teacher and his 10, 15 classmates.
Yeah.
Did I ever think that was going to happen 8 months ago? No. You know,
Yeah.
my biggest worry was where I was going to park to drop him off at school,
Yeah.
and now it's whether it's maintaining the de-risking any exposure or potential for exposure that he has, and that I get or my husband does. So
Yeah. Exactly. Well, at least we're all now a little bit more tech savvy. We can all use Zoom, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Good.
So I know you were talking about how your involvement with the BBC was kind of earlier, but could you talk about like how your current employment has been affected by this novel pandemic and like kind of what your venture group has been doing in respect with the pandemic?
Sure, sure. Well, I'm on my fourth private equity fund.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and I'm a senior advisor to folks like Virgin Orbit, Ampere, which is an electric plane company in Hawthorne, Sempra Energy and Southern California Gas here in LA. So I've always have had advisory roles just to keep my chalk sharp on other things.
Mhm.
And then my fund, we are a new fund. We launched last year, so we don't have any assets under management, but we plan to by the end of the year. And to their credit, a lot of my investors who have felt the pandemic, they continue to stick by investing. So we're in due diligence, and we hope to have a first close between now and maybe the next 3 or 4 months.
Mhm.
And my history of investing is generally in areas of fintech, financial technologies. So I was an early investor in a company called Cabbage with a K,
Mhm.
which is an online lending platform. Aspiration, which I'm a senior advisor to, which is probably the fastest growing online bank and financial services platform in the country.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, Revolution Foods, which helps to feed 2.5 million kids a week. Uh, Fully nutritious, locally sourced organic school lunches and so forth.
Amazing.
Uh,
Yeah.
but a lot of all of my history has been impact investing, and I invest in technologies that improve the quality of life by increasing access to better health care, better education, banking, financial services, and credit, and improved environmental conditions. But if it's not generating alpha, if it's not profitable, it's not generating an impact. So to me, capital plus leadership equals impact.
Right. Okay. Are your businesses like affected by the pandemic? Like it seems like it's kind
There,
of
there are two ways. I mean, you have COVID headwinds, which means that those businesses are having a challenging time given the environment. And then there's COVID tailwinds. And my portfolio of companies seem to be experiencing tailwinds for the most part. One of them has a headwind because it's an online lending platform
Mhm.
where payday lending is the enemy.
Yeah.
Um, as unemployment has increased, so too has demand for lending, right?
Mhm.
But then so has default rates. So we're trying to get our arm around the default rates and lowering the volume of lending that we're able to do.
Mhm.
So that helps de-risk that platform. The other companies seem to be doing better with the pandemic because of the exact reason you and I are talking about is they're remote driven. They're all virtual banking, virtual health, and they see, we have a company called Snap Nurse, which is a blockchain platform where nursing credentials are put on the blockchain And those credentials can then be seen by hospitals in need of real-time deployment for nurses. And up until this platform, something like that never existed. So now you could, if you're a nurse and you're working 4 days a week at one hospital, and you have five or 2 or 3 days a week more that you could work,
Mhm.
you can now go on this app and get 1 or 2 days at a time in an area where you otherwise wouldn't want to be full time, but you'll go for 1 or 2 days. And so a good example is in 2019, it's a startup. They closed 2019 on 2.1 million in revenue. In 2020, with the pandemic, they went from 2.5 million to, well, they're trending right now toward 53 to 60 million dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a very big uptick in terms of performance and in terms of the number of nurses that are on the platform and the number of hospitals on the platform asking for nursing support.
Wow.
And that's been driven obviously by the pandemic.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we have a company called Arcus, and they're an electronic billing, they're electronic money transfer and bill paying system. And they do a lot of exchanges between here and Mexico, right? And so nobody wants to touch money. Nobody wants to go into a Western Telegram store, no brick and mortar. They just want to do it online.
Mhm.
So they've seen an uptick of 80% in the past 4 or 5 months as well.
Wow.
Um, Aspiration, Aspiration, the online bank that I mentioned, they've seen more deposits in the past 2 months than they've ever seen. Their debit card is been used more in the past 3 months than ever. And this is a platform that's entirely fossil free, right? So, the money doesn't go in and be invested in, oil companies or petroleum. And so it too is an impact. So, there are companies that are benefiting from this. I think in the long run, the pandemic has changed things forever.
Mhm.
It's destabilized fossil fuels. So when fossil fuels does come back, it's not going to be as robust or permanent as it had been. Um, but here we are. We're talking on Zoom, right? In January, Zoom had a market cap of $10 billion, and the top 7 airlines of the world had a combined market cap of 125 billion, right? And as of April of this year, the market cap for Zoom was $48 billion.
Wow.
And the combined market cap of the same 7 airlines in April, 46 billion, $2 billion less, right?
Yeah.
The top three fossil fuel companies, their combined market cap is just under $1 trillion. Apple by itself is 2 trillion. So that tells you, right, that oil is just kind of floundering, looking for its future. And the pandemic has changed a lot of that because people are now discovering they don't need to live where they work. You don't need to live in Davis and work in San Francisco. You could live in Davis, have a job in San Francisco, and work in Davis by Zoom. So it's finally happened, right? Where you don't have to have a commute. And so, I think the world has changed. And the question is, what happens to all these big commercial office buildings? What happens to all these big retail malls? In my family, very similar to yours, maybe, I haven't gone into a Vons or a Ralph's in months. I
Yeah.
rarely begin with because we've been using Amazon Prime since it was launched,
Oh, isn't
but
it?
we use it even more. And so, what happens to that whole production chain right there? The physicalness of the economics is becoming more and more dematerialized.
Mhm. So, like, you were kind of touching upon that, but like, what do you think after quarantine is kind of over? How do you think society is going to look like compared
I,
to quarantine?
yeah, I mean, listen, I think we're going to be better for it. We always come out stronger with these types of crises, and you know, it's the spirit of our country. It's the spirit. It's the pioneer spirit of whom we are. There's no one that could call this, um, you know, their natural home. We're all immigrants,
Mhm.
and we brought with us the best and the brightest way of thinking about things to understand how we can make things better. And here we are in a situation where we will have to innovate our way out of it to a higher altitude of existence and economics. And we always do. You know, it's very much the same way that you know, Franklin Roosevelt once said during the Depression on his, State of the Union, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And that's exactly true here. And during World War II, he asked the country to ration meat, ration electricity, ration steel, ration rubber, and everyone complied. There wasn't a brand new automobile made in the United States from 1941 to 1946 because the entire production chain had converted to manufacturing tanks and planes, uh, armaments, to make sure that our kids who were going overseas had the best they could have to win that war. And there was nothing more in our history that defined evil from good than the Nazi era and the Allied forces with the great leadership that we had beating them.
Mhm.
The same is true here, or even in the 1960s when John Kennedy said that we're going to send a man to the moon safely back to Earth, and we'll do it by the end of this decade, not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Mhm.
In that time, we were spending 5.5% of the federal budget, if you can believe that, on that one objective. So over 5% of our entire federal budget and GDP was being spent to send a man to the moon. But we did it. And Americans didn't whine about it. Americans didn't say, oh, I don't want to pay my portion. It's my right to not pay taxes so that I don't care if this person goes to the moon or not.
Yeah.
Same is true here. We are Americans, and we have to all support one another. And if that means sanitizing your hands, wearing a mask, and reducing exposure, just do it. If you're a patriot, if you're an American, then you wear your face mask and you become part of the collective doing so that our children have a safer place to grow and blossom.
Yeah.
That's the end of the story to me. But yeah, we get out of it, and I think that we're better for it. I think we're better for it right now because, would I be talking to you otherwise? I mean,
Probably.
that's a good thing, right? And that's happening all around the country where people are using LinkedIn, they're using their Zoom, they're using meetings to basically get to know each other and get over the hump of having a personal meeting that used to be a mandate and now it's not. And there's a lot that could happen as a result of telecommunications. I mean, look at Virgin Orbit, right?
Mhm.
They're a low orbit satellite deployment platform. Do you think that business is going to grow in a world where global connectivity is going to be a primary demand and closing the digital divide? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So they're going to more people like you who are young and eager to get into the economy and make a difference to help them get into space and deploy as many satellites as they can to make sure that your generation has economic opportunity as well.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. Um, well, that's all I have for you. Do you have anything else to add? Any comments or questions?
No, well, just thanks for taking the time to support Brian and the BBC on this really important documentation of what I think is one of the more historical collaboratives that quickly came and went.
Mhm.
I mean, the epilogue of all of this is, you know, March, call it 16th, we started, and within 9 days, I believe, you'll have to ask Kevin, but I think within 9 days, we had a fully designed built ventilator. And then 2 weeks later, uh, we were asked by Dave and his team at OES to come and present the ventilator in Sacramento. So Dan and I and one other uh, Virgin Orbit team member flew up and we delivered the unit and basically everyone, probably 50 people, kicked the tires on it. And then the governor came out and spent an hour with us, and he kicked the tires on it. And it was great just to be able to talk and socialize with him. But you know, you could just tell and feel the leadership within one person who was really commanding the needs and the resources that the state can have to save lives. And he was in the midst of that. And I thought that it was a privilege for I and for Virgin Orbit to have any ability to contribute to the solutions for the people of California, and indeed other states, because they were calling us and we helped them as well. So, it was an absolute privilege to have an opportunity to work with BBC, with Brian Wong, probably the most intelligent collective of humanity I've ever worked with, and the most, quite frankly, compassionate and loving group of people who wanted to save lives. Every ventilator out saved 5 lives. And so that was our mission, and we met it, and the governor met his. And now we're on to the next chapter of the pandemic, which is trying to bring it down and get a vaccine out to the communities when we develop it. And hopefully we have more assertive leadership in the coming weeks at the federal level that could actually help take control of this. So, but thank you for your help in documenting this very important era of our lives.
No, yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Absolutely. Well, if you need anything in the future, you got my number.
Yeah.
All right. All right, kiddo. You take care of yourself. Thanks for your help and thanks for the time.
Thank you. No problem.